Gentleman yields back. Now recognize Mr. Morelle for his 5 minutes of questioning.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to start my question, and I apologize, I only have 5 minutes, so I'll try to get through some of this quickly. But first of all, appreciate very much your frustration. Okay. This was your job to defend the Capitol, and for the reasons both of this hearing and a lot of conversation, you weren't called on to do that. So obviously, it's palpable how strongly you feel about this missed opportunity to defend us, and I appreciate that, and I don't think there's any disagreement here. You should have been here much sooner, and I certainly don't know that anyone argues that it was your fault that happened. I am a little shocked. Mr. D'Esposito said, we're not here to talk about President Trump. To me, that's a little like asking Mrs. Lincoln, other than the incident, how did you like the play? The truth is, the Commander-in-Chief could have ordered the National Guard. And as I said earlier, and frankly, I think Mr. Griffith said, and I'll have to go back and look at the record, that the President ordered the troops out on January 6th. There's no evidence anywhere that I've heard of other than him saying it. There's literally no evidence of logs from the White House. There's no evidence anywhere that the President did that. And frankly, look, I don't know much about this. I'm a civilian. If I were the President of the United States, as soon as the breach happened, as soon as there was any measure of violence at the Capitol, I would have assembled people in the Situation Room, and I don't care about this. If the Secretary of Defense was there, the Secretary of the Army was there. I'm the Commander-in-Chief of the United States. And so I guess I'd begin, General Dean, if an order came from the White House, from the President, that deployed the National Guard, would that order have been questioned by anyone?
But I would answer it this way. I would say that order was delegated. The responsibility of the response from the commanding general was written in a written document to him that basically gave him parameters on what he could do and what he couldn't do.
So yeah, I appreciate that. I appreciate that. But I don't believe the delegation of authority exempts the higher authority. If a call came from the President or the White House that the President wants this deployed, if the Secretary of Defense were somewhere, the Secretary of the Army were somewhere else, would you have ignored that order?
No, we wouldn't have.
No.
Not at all.
That's, look, and I don't want to draw you into it. I'm just saying those who want to absolve the higher levels of command. Likewise, if the Secretary of Army had not acted, but the Secretary of Defense, Secretary Miller, had called, and his office had called General Walker and said, deploy the National Guard immediately, would anyone have questioned that order?
No, we wouldn't. I'll speak from my perspective. We wouldn't have questioned it, but we would have wanted it coordinated based on the document that was sent by the Secretary of the Army.
So not to interrupt you, you would have sought a manner to verify it and to make sure that that was legally the appropriate process, but you would have acted on it immediately, no?
I think the whole thing was there would have been a conversation, right?
Yeah.
So there was this talk about they needed a con-op, right? A concept of operations.
Yeah.
Well, that's a discussion. In a crisis, that's a discussion.
I agree.
And so with that, there would have been a discussion about the deployment of the National Guard with any order given by any senior official.
Yeah, and I guess I get, and this isn't necessarily a question, but what I hear is a lot of confusion between the White House, the Department of Defense, the Secretary of the Army and his office. I don't know what happened. I guess there's varying accounts. And what I think each of you is here to testify is that the order didn't come down.
Congressman, may I speak to that, please, sir?
Yeah, go ahead.
So, chain of command runs from the President to the Secretary of Defense to Secretary of the Army to General Walker. Now, the Secretary of Defense authorized the D.C. National Guard to deploy at 3 o'clock. The D.C. Guard was able to deploy at 3 o'clock.
Yes.
It had the capability, readiness to go on the street at 3 o'clock. But the order didn't come from the Secretary of the Army. So that was the
No, I understand.
The bottleneck there. The President would follow the chain of command. So typically the President, and I must
No,
remind,
I would say this, excuse me, I'm going to reclaim my time, I apologize. Is that if I were the President of the United States and had ordered it, if that were true, there's no evidence that happened, but let's say it had been ordered, and then 20 minutes goes by and nothing's happening, I'll be on the phone again to my secretaries, and I'd be on the phone to General Walker and say, what's going on? I've ordered you out, move out. And with all due respect, conversation should have happened. I don't know if it did or did not.
So Congressman, I think that, if the president would have called the Secretary of the Army, the Secretary of the Army would have said, we're moving as fast as we can. We need to be deliberate. We need to know more information. That's what the Secretary of the Army said in sworn testimony,
But
Congressman.
that's not what happened. He didn't say that in his testimony.
He did say that in his testimony, sir.
No, he didn't. He didn't say the President of the United States ordered him to do
No,
anything.
no, he said that if the president would have called, he said it would not have made a difference. The president's call would not have made a difference. Secretary
I
McCarthy.
disagree. Well,
Secretary McCarthy, I think you're right also.
Respectfully,
So-
sir, let me reclaim my time. In fact, my time is over. But the point that I'm trying to make is that I don't disagree. This is an important conversation. I don't think it's one for our committee. I think the Armed Services Committee ought to be holding this. And there is a question to make sure that come January of 2025, we better be damn sure we have communication that is clear, compelling, and chain of command. But I do think this, there is no way to absolve responsibility of the President, the Secretary of Defense, or the Secretary of the Army. You may dispute what happened, and I think that's fair, but something should have happened that triggered the deployment of the National Guard sooner so that you could have done your jobs, and we wouldn't be having this hearing this morning. So with that, I yield back.
Gentleman yields back, and I agree with him on his last statement that we need to be prepared for the next time that we have January 6th come up, which is in the law. I would also correct the record. I did say the president, the gentleman is correct, that's not in the evidence. The president had previously given Christopher Miller the authority to act, as he stated in his testimony, which was previously submitted into the record. And Christopher Miller is the one who gave the order that did not get followed, apparently, by the Secretary of Army. That being said, I now recognize